Hello, everyone. It's been a while since my last podcast. I've been struggling a little bit with where I want this podcast to go from here. I've been doing this now for over 3 years. And at this point, I've focused on kids in school who need support. The teachers and parents who are looking for resources to help them. A lot of times people can't afford to pay for professionals to support their child, so they need to have some direction. And the people on my podcast have all agreed to be a resource for anyone who contacts them. But it occurred to me that not all the kids, not all the parents, not all of the mentors that are in the education system. Lately, we've been hearing about the justice system, particularly the police, and with good reason. I'm appalled at what I'm hearing. And as I was looking into this, I realized that so many kids are not in the system. So many kids are on the street without good support. But you know what I'm finding? Lo and behold, I'm finding that the police are the ones who are reaching out into the community to provide mentorship and services. The police departments, who would have thought? We never hear about that. We're hearing about the atrocities committed by some horrible officers, but we're not hearing about the many departments across the country that are helping parents and kids in the greater community. I want to share some of that with you. There's so much being done, from projects, software that is being designed to support the effort of reaching into the community. Food is being provided. Trainings are being conducted. Please join me over the next series of podcasts and learn about what is being done across the country through the judicial system that is positive. I'm not negating that we still need to address a terrifying lapse in equality and humanity in our judicial system. We have a lot of work to do, but I want to show some of the efforts that are being made along those lines. My guest today is Dr. Chief Ruben Quesada of Swampscott, Mass. And he has told me that I have permission to call him Ruben. So I'm going to do that. Before we get into our dialogue, though, I want to read a little bit about his background. It's quite extensive, and I'm not going to be able to read the whole thing, but the link will be available for you, and you can certainly go into some of the particulars. But Ruben Quesada was born and raised in Phoenix, Arizona. He was an at-risk student whose interest in police work began at 16 years of age. After his arrest, get that, arrest, and subsequent involvement with the Police Activities League. Ruben began his career in law enforcement as a student intern with Flagstaff, Arizona Police Department. And in 1993, just prior to graduating for college, he became a reserve police officer. There's a lot more here, and you can read all of the things that he has done over the years. He was involved with the Mesa, Arizona Police Department full-time, and when he retired, he became the Deputy Chief of Police at Northern Essex Community College Police Department. He was sworn in as Chief of Police in Swampscott, Mass. In April of 2022. As an officer, he's worked and supervised a variety of assignments, everything from parole officers in training, undercover narcotics, criminal investigations, family advocacy, gang units, a whole bunch of stuff. He attained his doctorate in education from Grand Canyon University in Phoenix, Arizona. He is a staunch advocate of community policing and is honored to represent Swampscott Police Department. There's a reason why I have been dogging him to get him to do this. His background is so encompassing of being an at-risk student in the community where he grew up. To end up being a chief of police, what a road he has gone by. And I want him to be able to explain some of that to you, because we don't often hear about these amazing journeys. Thank you so much, Ruben, for being with me today. I appreciate your time and I appreciate your patience. It's been a journey for the two of us to get to this today. And
Thank you,
I
Jenny.
really
Thank you
appreciate it.
so much.
I would like to start a little bit with your background as a troubled youth. I would like you to talk to the listeners about why you were defined as an at-risk youth. Talk a little bit about your parents. I know you said that someone found something in the trash at some point. Address your friends that you seem to develop around you and why you use them almost as a support structure. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Sure, certainly. Thank you for having me on your show today. It's so great to speak with you. So, you talk a lot about kids who need support. Our teenagers, our young adults need support, and the support comes from many areas. And I feel that I am absolutely a good example of a kid who needed support. And so when I look back and you talk about um, how I got into the system, if I may. So my parents did not have a lot of money. We did not. We grew up in the Phoenix, Glendale, Phoenix area, and my father was a sanitation worker. My mother was a high school dropout. She had me when she was 16 years old,
Wow.
and it was always a struggle financially for us. One of the things that growing up I learned that I just I don't know how I knew it when I think back. We didn't have a lot of money. We moved from rental place to rental place, and I think that that forged who I was in my identity as a young Mexican American kid growing up in the Phoenix area. Uh, I think when I look back and I think about police, I while my parents were supportive of the police and we never had any personal run-ins with the police.
Mhm.
All I know is that I had family members who were incarcerated. I had uncles, I had
Wow.
cousins, and so all I knew was I may not hate the police. I just don't want anything to do with the police. I don't want to be stopped by them. I don't want to be questioned. And I think that was kind of the general feeling amongst my family members. It's not that we thought that, oh, the police are bad, but I don't want anything to do with the police. And so growing up and gravitating to other kids who I thought were like me, looked like me, acted like me, I gravitated to individuals who were in gangs. I graduated or gravitated towards individuals who, might have looked different, had their head shaved. I remember a story, telling my mom. I was in seventh grade, and I was just hanging out with a friend of mine during the summer at my grandma's house, my nana's house, and I remember he had his head shaved. He had like these kind of baggy clothes, and I came home. I said, "Mom, I want to shave my head."
Oh,
And
that went over
because I
good.
knew that all my friends had their heads shaved because
Right.
I don't know if it looked cool. I don't know if that was, but that's what my friends were doing. And so uh, immediately she's like, "You are absolutely crazy. You're not shaving your head. In fact, I don't want you hanging out with those boys anymore."
Oh.
Uh, because I think that she knew that I was probably headed towards maybe the wrong direction. I I learned to place labels on myself. And so I know that, hey, I'm a young Mexican Hispanic kid growing up in the Phoenix area, and I'm going to gravitate towards other kids, young Hispanic kids who look like me, and I'm going to mimic or mirror what they are doing and how they're acting. And I think that one of the things that we always have to be careful of is that we place labels on ourselves. So my friends said, "Yeah, this is who we are, and this is kind of how we act." And I started mimicking those actions, and I realized that I began faltering in school. I started getting in trouble. all because I thought, hey, that's what my friends are doing. That's what everybody else is doing. And that's what we do. And
When you and I were talking earlier, you used the words cool, and you said your friends were feared and you wanted to emulate that. Do you think that had something to do with the look you were trying to develop?
absolutely. And while I say, maybe at the time I was thinking that I was cool, I wanted to be respected because I saw that my friends who were who I wanted to look like, act like, talk like, they were respected because they were feared.
Right.
Because whether they might be in a gang, they have people who um, that who knows, when you're talking about gang members and the gang lifestyle, it's sometimes better to be feared than it is to be respected. But although they're one and the same. The notion that I got early on was I'd rather be feared by my peers, by my friends, so that they know, hey, you don't mess with me and you don't mess with my friends.
Was
And
being a
so
good student, was that something that made you respected or not respected?
not being a good student. So I inadvertently placed labels on myself. Hey, I'm not supposed to be a good student. That's not what I do. I know I have family members in jail who have done prison time, several, and they're respected. And I know I am not supposed to do well in school because that's not my thing. In fact, if I do well in school, my friends are going to be upset with me because I'm acting white. If
Oh,
I start to if I
interesting.
start to do excel in school, I'm doing the reading. You're acting like a white kid, and for me, that was the last thing that I wanted to do. And so that's what really until fast forward to my arrest when I was 16 years old. I was hanging out with the wrong crowd. I was doing the wrong things. I was not excelling in school, and it wasn't until that time in my life, that changing point, one of the turning points, that I realized I can't continue on this path. Otherwise, I surely will end up like my
So
cousins, my
so
uncles.
focus a little bit on this arrest and, what the consequences of the arrest were and how that changed that was I call that your aha moment. Everybody has an aha moment, and, that seems to be your aha moment where the path you were on, the trajectory of your life significantly changed. So
Certainly,
what
I
happened?
started smoking marijuana with my friends. In fact, my arrest was because I was smoking marijuana my high school, and a security guard found me, turned me in, and called the Phoenix Police Department. That was my introduction into the criminal justice system.
Wow.
And after just not only dealing with that at school, I was suspended from school for a number of days. I lost, most importantly, uh, my parents lost all trust and faith and respect in me.
Mm,
And what they thought was, hey, Ruben's not a bad student, but he's okay. He's not getting into trouble. Even though I was taught correctly by my parents to have respect people, have a good work ethic, and have integrity, I was not. I was just, it was a facade.
mhm.
And once I got arrested, I was sent a court date. I went to court. I had to appear in front of a judge, and I got my sentence of 16 hours of community service.
You could have gone to jail, but you didn't. Is that
I
right?
I could have, and I think maybe because I was still on the younger side, 16 years old. I'd
Mhm.
never been in trouble before, or shall I say, I'd never been caught.
Right.
And the judge granted me some leniency by giving me 16 hours of community service, which I had to serve within my community. I hated it. I was upset, but I also realized the most important people who meant everything to me, my family, is I let them down, and I even at 16 years old, I realized I've let my family down. Uh, my friends are not who I think they are, and most importantly, I let my grandfather down, who
Did
had
they
always
did your parents or your grandfather ever explicitly share their sentiments with you about this? Or was
just
this
my
just a feeling that you got?
just my mother. My mother was
Okay.
a is very strong-willed and not afraid to tell her son like it is. And so, one of the things that struck me to this day is she was so upset. She said, "You are not. You're not gonna turn into anything. You are a loser, and you are
Oh
going to
my
become a loser,
gosh. Oh
and
my
you are
gosh.
never going to amount to anything." And to this day, I remind my mother I said, "Hey, mom, do you remember when you said that?" And
Oh.
she's like, "I would never say that, son." And she's like, "Honey, I would never say that." I'm like, "No, mom,
Oh, no.
those were piercing words."
Was
But
this before or after your mom went back to school?
it was about the same time. She was actually at the same time she was going back to school to get her GED.
Mhm.
Her ultimate goal at that time, and kind of unbeknownst to me, was she always wanted to work for a police department.
Oh my gosh. You must have been like, "Holy smokes, what the heck?"
Even though my mom says she didn't say those piercing words,
Right,
it changed the trajectory of my life,
right.
and it truly did. And from that moment on, I decided I don't. I was kicked off my high school football team. I was suspended from school. I my my family, my most important mentor, not only my father but my grandfather, who only had a eighth grade education, looked down on me, and it was up to me now to gain back their trust and respect.
Here you had been working so hard to get respect, but from the wrong people, and you lost it from the people who care for you the most. That had to be heartbreaking.
It was, and that's why I'd like to say that I'm in the position that I'm at now, because it truly changed my outlook. Even at 16 years of age, I realized that I want to have a good life. I want to have a good job. I'd like to make good money, but most importantly, I want to have my family back,
Right.
and that was most important to me.
So your mom ended up getting her GED, and then she went to work for the police department as an investigator?
She got her GED. She actually worked at a local high school as an administrative aide.
Mhm.
And that was at the same time that I was then placed, after my community service, I was placed in the at-risk youth program, which is aptly called the Police Activities League. And it was at
Right.
that time that she was working as an admin aide in the local high school, trying to finish her GED, and I was placed into the at-risk youth program.
So I have a note here, something about finding something in the trash. What's all that about? Do you remember?
I'm trying to. I don't.
All right, I just have a note here to ask you about that, but that's okay. We
Okay,
can we
I
can
might
we can
recall
move
that
on.
story.
All right. Okay, that's all right. Well, you have some other stories coming up that are good stories. So you're now involved in the police in your community, and you go on to obviously do quite well at school and get some degrees along the way, have positions in the police department in many different capacities, and now you're a chief of police. Let's talk a little bit about your goals for your community and how you are encouraging your officers to become more engaged in the community. What does engagement mean to you in particular? Because different people have different ideas about what engagement is and how you are working to develop the public trust.
I like to keep it simple and use alliteration: courage, compassion, and kindness. And that's what I tell my officers, as well as another C. I know there's a K in there, but another C is
Mhm.
constitutional policing. And so, what's most important to me as coming in as a being the chief here in Swampscott, Massachusetts, is connecting with our community. Because if it wasn't for my experiences with the criminal justice system, with those officers who mentored me, who believed in me, who taught me that I can make something of myself, I wouldn't be here today. And so my goal as a chief is to ultimately pay that forward. And how do we do that? How do we ensure that we are mentoring our children, our kids, our community? How are we part of that? And so by, it's engagement, community engagement. It's much more than, hey, I stopped by and waved at somebody at the local convenience store, or, you see me walking down the street and, you might know my name. It is much more than that. And um, it is being at places that you don't expect me to be. Hey, guess what? I'm going to show up to the library today and I'm going to talk to the patrons. And I hope that you see that, hey, I can't believe what was going on. A police officer was there. Oh, nothing. They just wanted to speak to the community.
Wow.
As well as going to the local parks. Now, we have the luxury here. Um, we are not, it's a very affluent area in Massachusetts. Our ex-governor lives here. It is a seaside,
No, you told me that.
beautiful seaside community. So we have time, and I'm not saying that we're not busy, but there are certain times in an officer's shift that we have directed our officers, and I don't even want to say directed, because my officers are from this town. They grew up in this town. There's generations of families. They have generations of families in this town. So they'll go out to a baseball game and just stop by. Hey, how's everything going? Hey, um, they'll call themselves by their first names and they'll just show up. And that is where these connections really come in. And it's not just, I think you and I've talked about it. It's not just saying, hey, we're having an event today. It's a coffee with a cop. Come and ask me anything.
Photo op.
Or pizza with police.
Right.
It's not some catchy phrase. It is actually going out there and getting to know me, getting to know Ruben. This is, listen, I have problems just like you. I have kids at home. I have bills to pay. I have several things that we have to do. I'm a father. I'm a brother. I'm a regular citizen. People, many times people look at me and they're like, "Huh, you don't look like a chief." Well, it's when I'm off duty and I'm just wearing a t-shirt and jeans, you would never know that I'm a chief. I'm just a regular guy, just like anybody else.
I want to get back to that, but first I want to
Sure.
ask you, one of the phrases you used with me when we spoke before in line with this a comment that you're making about connecting in the community. You said the quick talk versus the follow-up. And I would imagine that's kind of what you're talking about, where the police go to the library if they see something that they feel requires a follow-up, they're going to go and check on somebody or try and
Yes,
reconnect with somebody.
it is those critical, crucial conversations that you have. And it could have been at the library where I just happens to speak to a patron and they say, hey, I've been having troubles at home. My son is having mental illness, mental health problems or issues. And that's where the follow-up comes in, where we actually become, where it might be a community engagement, a feel good, hey, but we actually get to follow up on these issues that we've just struck up a conversation with, that we might not have had we not been there at the library, have we not been at the senior center.
What's the story with the school resource officer that you told me about, and a
Uh,
student and a parent?
so we had a an event that happened. All those students have cell phones, now. And
Oh,
so
yeah.
this goes back to community. It goes back to those crucial conversations. We had a student who was on Snapchat who airdropped, or he got it from Snapchat image, but it was an image of what could be, what to me looked like a anti-Semitic symbol.
Mhm.
He airdropped that to the entire auditorium.
Oh.
The school resource officer found out who that was. We talked to this individual, and it I say this individual, it was a kid, this 14, 15-year-old kid. We talked to him. He had never been in any trouble before. The SRO developed a really good rapport with this kid, and we have a large Jewish population in our town. And so what we did is we got a hold of the local rabbis, and
Oh.
we got a hold of the local rabbis. We got a hold of the parents, and the parents were absolutely wonderful of this teenager, and said, we want to teach this individual, this kid, what he did, and that the symbol that he displayed is a symbol as hate, and we just want to show him a different. We want to show him a different side, and it's not about, yeah, we can, maybe we can charge this kid, maybe we could put him through the justice system, much like I
Oh,
was.
right.
But what is more impactful than having this young adult teenager talk to the rabbis, talk to the community, the religious community, and let them know how they feel about that. And so having that is much more impactful than, I'm going to submit charges to the court. You're going to go through the system.
Mm.
We make much more of a difference that way
By
through.
connecting to them at a personal level and showing them at a personal level the impact that what he did has on the other people of the community. So he understands that going through the system isn't going to make that connection.
And we brought that back to the school. I mean, this is a complete learning and teaching moment. So we were able to bring that back to the high school and say, listen, this is very hurtful to all of us. If you discriminate, you say hurtful things, you're hurting every single one of us. And when you do that, this is how it impacts the community. And so it's those type of things that I want our officers to connect with. And that is, to me, that is the ultimate example of why we are here. We're not here to arrest our way out of issues or crime. We are here to inform, educate, and again, work with compassion, courage, and kindness in policing. And I think that's what's needed. And I won't I won't pretend that there are not bad things that happen in the world and bad things that can happen. Crime does happen. I'm not here to say it doesn't, but I am here to say we as law enforcement, and me myself as an individual, that's what helped me. That is what got me to understand, listen, I want to be able to bring the community together. I am the uniter of the community. I'm not here to divide the community. And so I think that's the best way, that's just a small example and the best way to do it.
You've had some experiences of discrimination as you have worked your way up through the ranks. And I think this might be a good place to talk a little bit about that so that the listeners understand how you can relate to this episode and how perhaps some of the things that the way you dealt with some things in your life, you chose to, address and reconnect with other people when they were having the same issues. So can we talk a little bit about that?
Sure. I think my first instance of, I, I've always been cognizant of it. Working, I worked at an auto parts store when I was 17 years old. And I remember somebody came up to me and said, "Hey," or I approached an individual and said, "Hey, how can I help you? Are you looking for a certain part?" Not that I know anything about vehicles,
Right,
but
right.
the individual said, "I don't want to talk to you. I don't talk to your kind." And I remember thinking, um, I was just trying to help this individual. I was just trying to, and that was one of the instances where I remember I'm a auto parts worker. I'm here doing my job, but I feel that I was treated disparagingly just because of how I look
Mhm.
or what my ethnicity may be. And so fast forward, I'm working as a brand new police officer in Glendale,
Right,
Arizona.
right.
I'm 22 years old. I don't know anything about life. I'm still learning, and I stop an individual for um, the person was weaving in and out of traffic, maybe potentially drunk. I speak to this individual. To make a long story short, get him out of the vehicle, and my trainer says, "Hey, I need to speak with the sergeant." More than likely, we're going to allow this individual to go home. He's probably impaired, but he was 18 years old, and we're just going to find him a ride home, talk to the parents, and see what we can do. So this individual starts yelling at me and says, "Hey, I think I'm ready to leave." I say, "Hey, just hang tight for a second. We'll be right with you. Let the sergeant, let my officer speak to the sergeant. We'll get you out of here."
Mhm,
He
mhm.
says, "Do you maybe you don't understand me, you," and then he hurled derogatory names
Right,
for being
right,
Mexican, being Hispanic. You effing this, you effing that.
right.
Do you understand English? Do you know what I'm saying? And I thought it was the first time in my life where my identities intersected. Not only am I representing the badge that I wear, the
Right.
patches on my shoulder, but I'm representing who I am and my facial features. And it was truly a moment of self-reflection, thinking, listen, I'm not here to represent any ethnicity. I am here doing my job as a police officer. And so that was the first time that I started to realize people are treating me differently because of what my my Spanish surname or what I look like, rather than who I am and what I'm acting. I'm acting under the color of the law and justice. And that continued over the years as being a police officer. I've had several times where I stop an individual and I try to talk to them, and they call me names. I'm not talking to some dumb this and that.
Right.
And um, it was it was hurtful. Now,
Mhm.
I you're a police officer, or you have to be able to learn to have thick skin and take everyone has First Amendment rights.
Not
And
not
so
take it personally, it's not about you,
that's correct. And so, but how can you not take
but
it
it
as
is
personal?
about you.
It is personal. So I go home and I think, gosh, people are looking at me and judging me based only on what I look like. Fast forward, so I'm working undercover. I have my head shaved. It was the 90s, had an earring, had a big goatee,
Mm,
and I'm wearing baggy clothes. You probably, if you saw me back then, you wouldn't think I was a police officer. I got treated horribly by what I would think as upstanding citizens.
mm,
My family and I went to a local restaurant and we're eating dinner. I'm working undercover. That's my look now is a
mm,
shaved
mhm,
head. Now
mhm,
I got my shaved head,
mhm.
and big goatee and my earring. And I remember the manager was going, you know, uh, uh, seat to seat, saying, "Hey, how's your dinner? How's everything going?" He came to me, he looked at me, looked at my family, and he just walked away and went to the next table. And I thought, you're judging me based on what I look like. You have no idea that
Who I am, I'm a
I'm a
police
police
officer.
officer.
Right.
I have an education. Um, I stand for what I believe is good, but you're judging me based on what I look like. And that's not fair.
Do you think, that your community, would benefits from these kinds of i- outreach programs by the police department? And can you talk a little bit about what some of your goals are in reaching out into the community based on some of the experiences that you've had, but also based on what you're seeing in the community as you know, are working with other youth and families?
So I think, when you talk about how can the community benefit, you have to look at what is the makeup of our community. And so my community where I'm at now is 97% white. So me as a Hispanic, uh, I have to find out what are the issues in my community, and as not as just Hispanic, but as the chief, what are the issues,
Mhm.
and how can I bring my experiences closer with my community. And so when I say white, I've truly studied, um, in my doctoral research, I've one of the uh, underlying theoretical foundations that I've studied is the critical race theory, and I would like to say I'm versed in that topic. And when you look at some of what the CRT scholars have said, is it's not about black and white, black, white, or brown, or whatever it may be. It's about understanding differences. And so, what I try to bring here is how do I connect with my community so that they understand, we all understand differences. So one of the things that I read and really took away from CRT was you can't just call a person white. You are so much more than that. You are
Oh, I like
your
that.
your
Yes.
religious background is
Mhm,
who you are. Your
mhm.
parents and where they're from defines who you are. Um, your neighborhood where you grew up defines a little bit of your identity. So to me, when somebody says, "Oh, well, they're just white," that it hurts me too, because listen, my my family is, I don't want to say just white.
Mm.
They're not. My family, my son is half Jewish and half Mexican. My wife is Jewish. You're not just, if somebody just sees you and says, "Oh, that's just a white person," you're so much more than that. And
And Jewish doesn't just define you either. No, I mean,
absolutely,
it's white, it's Jewish, it's living in the community you live in, it's the neighborhoods you came from,
yes,
and we have a tendency, I think, to uh, throw a term in a bag, shake it up, and think that defines everything we need to know about a person. As you said, oh, they're white, oh, they're Hispanic, oh, they're Jewish, oh, they're black. Um, and I liked your comment about CRT, that it's more than just black and white,
right.
and I'm using
Yes.
that as a metaphor as well. It's more than that. And I think that's important to understand. And I'm not quite sure why there is such reservation about this. I don't know a lot about it. I admit that it's not something that I am familiar with, but I'm not quite sure why there is such a reservation about it, other than um, from what I understand in talking to other people, that it makes some people uncomfortable, and we don't want to make kids uncomfortable. We don't want to make them think that they're, guilty of doing anything. But
Right.
we can't understand something. We can't be aware of something if we don't understand what it is we're doing. And I want to go back to what you were talking about, that boy in school, where you made him aware of what he was doing.
So
And
that is that is the
no,
prime example of understanding differences. And so that's how I'm able to bring that back to our community. Listen, we are much more than we have next door. We have the city of Lynn has a population of 70% Hispanic. Salem, Massachusetts, that borders our town, has I believe, 25 or 30% Hispanic
oh,
population, as well as an African American, a good number, I don't want to say good number, probably
Significant.
a 7% population of African Americans.
Mhm.
So listen, this is truly the melting pot. You can say, well, you're a white affluent, I use air quotes, a white affluent community, but the makeup of our region is much more than that. So you can't just say, well, and that's what we brought back to the high school, to having these crucial conversations and saying, you can't don't place labels. And it goes back to the beginning. I placed labels on myself. That's why I thought I had to be respected, have a shaved head, be feared. Don't place labels on yourself, but also don't place labels on anybody else, because you don't know what their background is. You don't know um, where the family history is, what they define themselves
In
as.
your police department, do you have, number one, is it an ethically diverse group? No.
No, it is not. We have now two females. It's a small police department, very small police department,
Mhm.
which is common in the Commonwealth here in
Right,
Massachusetts. We have
right.
32 officers, two females. I'm the sole Hispanic, and it is a male-dominated profession that,
Yes.
um, you know, truly we are trying to change so that we reflect all of the members of the community.
Do you get any pushback from your officers when you try to encourage them to participate or engage with the community in these ways? Because I mean, do they ever say to you, look, that's not my job. I mean, I've got enough to do, doing my job. I don't need to be out there talking to, every little kid on the street kind of a thing. I mean, do you get any pushback from that?
No, that's one thing I have seen out here is the true essence of community policing is alive and well here in Massachusetts and in my department and my town. And so I've never got I've never received any pushback. They're excited because what we're trying to do, you talked about the atrocities that have happened. And while I can't and I won't ever defend things that have happened to Tyree Nichols or
Right,
George Floyd,
right.
absolutely awful, and it it
Oh,
it turns my stomach. Now it's my job to answer to that. And so while I can say, hey, that didn't happen in Massachusetts, that won't happen here, I, as a law enforcement officer, shall shall and have to answer to that. And so, what is my answer? My answer is by our actions. And what are we doing to create these critical conversations about race, ethnicity, policing, labels, categories? And this is the start of it.
you started a program called the Community Engagement Police. Can you talk about that? Is that something you're still working in your community? How did that come to be? What is it?
Yeah, so we started a policy on community engagement. So it was a community engagement policy, and what we found, and I like to call myself a police nerd. I love reading research articles on policing. So what I started when I got here, was one of the things I noticed is, having grown up in being part of the community, being an at-risk kid, one of the things that I've seen and knowing now after 30 years in law enforcement, we count everything. We count statistics. We count how many accidents happened to this location, how many citations were written by a certain officer,
Mhm.
um, how many arrests were made, how many liquor violations did we have in the month of whatever. We
Mhm.
count everything, but we don't count qualitative data.
Ooh,
So if my officer goes and speaks to somebody, or speaks to a Boy Scout troop,
mhm,
or goes speaks to the kids at the YMCA,
mhm.
how is that counted? And so what we did is we created this policy that says, if you are, and there are certain standards. Um, Again, I can't be just in my car driving by and say, "Hi, oh,
Right,
community engagement." No, that doesn't count.
right, right,
Let's
right.
be reasonable here. So, if I go and I speak to the at-risk youth, or I go to a community forum, I go speak to the senior center, I go to the Jewish community during an event and I speak about us. That is community engagement. And so we started to quantify community engagement. That's just as important as me driving to give someone a parking citation. It's more important. It's more, it's just as important as, hey, somebody just was arrested for shoplifting. Those
Do
are
you do a survey of some kind to get people's feedback on how they thought the program went, or?
So that's probably the next iteration that we would be
Okay,
looking at
okay.
is how well and what is the thought on our community engagement contacts. Is there something that you would like to, as a community, is there something that our community would like to see? Because truly, community policing is about what are the needs and what does the community want and need.
So you talked a little while about restorative justice. You happened to mention that. Can you elaborate a little bit on that, and how you're implementing that to try and use it as an education
I
tool
think,
rather than?
when I think just the example of the anti-Semitic symbol, to
Mm,
me, that is restorative justice.
okay.
Now, the child, the teenager learned a lesson. He learned about it. He spoke about it. He brought it back to the high school and had forums about it. Instead of just criminal justice, where we notify his parents, we complete a summons so that kid
Mm.
has to go to court now. He has a court date. He might have a probation officer. He might have to do community service like I did. What's much more important is the restorative justice. What happened? How did he fix, in simple terms? How did he fix what he did, and did he understand what he did, and those actions? And so to me, that's much more important than a statistic of another student who was arrested, and maybe that student may not be like me. Maybe I learned my lesson once. That's all it took. Every child is different, and
Mhm.
every child deserves that opportunity. And so for me, restorative justice, it's not just in that. Restorative justice is also if I have, we don't have these issues. In my last department and agency, we had issues where we had persons in crisis. If they commit a crime, they're trespassing. If someone had asked them to leave, they said, "Hey, I'm not leaving." They might have some mental health issues. They might be homeless. Well, does it do that individual any good to arrest them and put them through the system?
Right.
It doesn't. And so restorative justice to me is, how do we provide this person resources? How do we educate, inform, and provide resources before enforcement? So if you have an individual who is having homelessness issues, mental health issues, our job is not to make their life worse. How can we help this individual to get the resources that he or she needs?
Is
And so
that
to me,
is that what that wraparound services is kind of finding out what the needs are, and not just the arrest and walk away, but
absolutely.
kind of help to support some other services. You also said to me at one point when we were talking, that you like to say to you have a youth leadership academy that you were talking about, and
Yes.
you said to me, one of the things that you try and get across to youth in particular, uh, is that just because your quote is here, you are not a bad person just because you've made a dumb choice. And I think that's so important because kids who do make dumb choices are very often made out to be bad people. And they kind
Yeah,
of feel that that changes their whole life. They're never going to get out of it. So why should they even try?
that's
They're
right.
messed up.
And that's your although your choices, we evolve as kids, as even adults. I'm still evolving. If a child, a teenager, a young adult makes a bad choice, it doesn't make them a bad person. And I think that's most important. And I truly understand that because I made a horrible decision, but it changed my life for the better, and it made me want to become who I am today. And so just because you make that choice, do not put that label on yourself. Again, it goes back to
The
labels.
labels,
Don't put it on yourself. You are
right?
not a bad person. Now, what you do after this is a choice, and it's up to you to make the right choice that you feel is best for
We
you.
don't learn anything from making the right choices all the time. We learn things from making bad choices. That's when we're learning. That's when we're doing most of our learning.
If
Is
you never fail, you will never succeed.
you're feeling it right. Right. There's one other thing that I want to get into a little bit with you, because one of the ways we got connected was through an individual who's developing some software to help pinpoint some issues that are going on in communities. And I'm wondering um, it's called risk terrain modeling. And I'm wondering how you're using this software in your community, how you decided that this was something that you wanted to implement.
So when um, the person that we both know, I have the utmost respect for scholars.
His name is Dr. Joel Kaplan. I
That's
will
right.
talk about him in a minute, but I didn't want to focus on him right now. I wanted to
Sure.
focus on you.
So one of the things I learned from Dr. Kaplan was risk terrain modeling focuses on conditions that might affect crime.
Mhm.
So if I look at my area of responsibility in my town, what are some of the things that occur? And it doesn't have to be the crime, speeding in the same location. The easy thing to say is, well, we need more police. We need police to give out tickets.
Right.
But what are some of the conditions that are that, affecting speeding, affecting traffic collisions?
Mhm.
And so, what risk terrain modeling does is it looks at are taking a more of a holistic approach at, okay, are the streets wide enough? Do we need to maybe look at, are there and I think of one location in my area. There's like a big planter slash tree in the area. Is this causing obstruction views? So it's, in simple terms, the it could be the environmental factors that contribute to speeding, contribute to traffic, traffic congestion, traffic accidents. And so it's just it's just taking a different look at, well, we have speeding. Well, we need speed bumps, speed tables. We need another light there, a traffic light. We need more police officers. We need enforcement. Those are the easy things to look at. It is looking at, okay, wait a minute. Let's look at this like we've never looked at this before. What is some of the things that are causing? Maybe our sidewalks are too large. Maybe they're not large enough. I don't, it's just
But
that kind
this
of.
software helps you to pinpoint what some of the environmental factors are that are causing the issue, rather than focusing on the people that are living in these communities. Is that right?
That is absolutely right. That is absolutely right. So if you have crime occurring in a certain location, well, why is crime occurring in that location? Is it occurring in any other location? Are there any other? It focuses not on people, but on the place. And so that's what I love about risk terrain modeling and data informed community
Okay,
engagement.
I was going to ask about that, the DICE component of it. You
Yes.
use those two together, the data informed community engagement, which is getting you information, I'm assuming, so that you can then engage in corrective measures. Is that
Yeah, it is. It
that?
is taking a look at what are the factors involved in crime, in that crime. And it really is, it's not, we always think, well, there's crime, there's police. You have to, this is taking a different approach in that, no, every stakeholder um, has a say so. So if you have a business that has been um, getting robbed. Well, what are it's the place. There's a place, you have that defined, but what are some of the factors that why that location is getting robbed or has several thefts? And well, that's when you include the owners of the business. That's when you include the residents of the business. You can say residents might have a say so and say, hey, we notice at 10 o'clock every night kids are doing this, and then they're running over to the business, and then that's when the thefts or robberies are occurring. So it's not just, all we see as police is, oh, robberies, thefts, this is going on, we have to fix it. But we're not getting the full picture from the various stakeholders who have vital information. And it's not only that, it's sharing that information with your various stakeholders. It's not like, I think when I was a young police officer, someone would say, if I was in the neighborhood, someone would say, hey, officer, what's going on? I'd say, nothing to see here. And it is now saying, look, and this is what happened. Maybe you might be able to help me figure out what's really the underlying cause. And that's what DICE is.
That's awesome. That's awesome. I'm going to end, but I want to end with the quote you gave me. I don't know if you remember this, but I love the quote. I am going to borrow it from you in the future as well. But this is your quote. It hurts police when we fail to understand. Police are not always the only answer, but we are part of everything that happens. And I love that. And it is so true. And I hope that it will be embraced when people hear it, because I think it is not only applicable, but I think that it is something that we can use to move on with, not from, but move on with, if we have that understanding. Thank you so much for being with me today. And you have so much information to share. And I appreciate your sticking with me. I also want to tell everyone that Dr. Joel Kaplan will be my next guest on the podcast in June. He is the developer with his co-founder of Risk Terrain Modeling, RTM, and DICE, which is Data Informed Community Engagement. He was recognized by the Department of Justice for his work, and just got back from the White House. That's why I was able to grab him. He had a meeting there talking about his program RTM, which is being used not just around the country, but around the world. And I know that he's going to have a lot to share with us, and I hope that you will join with me. I have included the link for him on this podcast so that you can prepare yourself a little bit for what is coming up. Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you again, Dr. Chief Quesada. Thank you so much, and be safe.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you.